Good morning. Myself, Mehak Bhatia, Assistant Professor, IIMT College of Science and Technology, Greater Noida. Today I am going to deliver a lecture on methods in Java. What are methods? Methods are very important part of any programming language. So, in Java also we use methods, and today I am going to explain you all how are methods used in Java? What is the relevance of using methods in Java? And different terminologies that are used with respect to methods in Java. So let's begin. What are methods? A method in Java is a block of code that performs specific actions mentioned in it when called. So what do we mean by a method? Method is basically a block of code that performs specific actions. Whatever actions we mention in a method, whenever we call a method, all those actions are performed. A method is a block of code which only runs when it is called. So we cannot run a method automatically. We have to call it to execute all the functionalities that are inside that method. We can also pass parameters into a method. Now, in the further slides, we are going to discuss in detail about what are parameters. Methods are used to perform certain actions, and they are also known as functions. So, in different programming languages, methods are known by different names. So, in many programming languages, methods are also called functions. So method and function is one and the same thing. In Java, we call a function as a method. Uh, Now I'm going to explain you with an example what a method is. So here I have created a main class, and I have created a function called max. Max here is the name of the method that I have created, and I have used certain keywords along with this method max, which I'm going to discuss. But here max with these parentheses is a method, and we can write any code that we need to execute inside this method called max. We can name a method anything according to our requirement. We can name the method anything. So here I have created a method named max. We can create any method with any name. Uh, Here I have created a method called max. So whatever code I need to execute, I can write that code inside the block of the method. So max is the name of the method in the previous example, and there were certain keywords that I've used with the method. One of the keywords was static. So what does static mean? Static I have written before the method. And what does static means? Static means that the method belongs to the main class, and the static methods can be assessed without creating an object of the class. So we do not need to create any object of the class. We can assess it uh, without creating the object. So it becomes easy. So this is the relevance of the static keyword in this example. I have also used a keyword called void. What does void means? Void means that this method is not going to return any value. So we can use this keyword if we do not want the method to return any value. We just want the code to get executed. So we write this keyword called void. If we want to return a value from a method, then we will use the return keyword that we are going to see in the upcoming slides. So let's move on to why we use methods. So there must be some reason as to why are we using these methods in a code, right? So why do we use methods? So there are many uses of methods, and we are going to discuss all the uses one by one. So the first use of methods is to reuse code. So we can define the code once and use it many times. So this is one of the most important and basic relevance of using methods, that we can write the code once and we can call it any number of times that we want. So it saves our time, and our tasks become easier. So the methods help to implement our tasks easier because we have written the code only once and we can use it as many times as we want. So definitely that is going to save our time also, um, because we have written it once and we can use it n number of times. And methods also help in data security, and the methods also enable polymorphism. So polymorphism is a concept in the programming languages, uh, which is a further detailed topic which we can discuss in some other lecture, because it's a detailed topic in itself, polymorphism. Next, methods can be overloaded or overridden. So these terms, overloading and overridden, we are going to discuss in the upcoming slides, like what are method overloading and what is method overriding. We can discuss that in the upcoming slides. And the methods also allow recursion and it acts as a loop. So methods are used in recursion also. So if we want to call a method n number of times, in that concept we can use method. Okay, now let's move on to how we can create a method. So we have studied about what a method is, how we can, what are the uses of methods, what is the relevance of method. Now let's move on to how can we create a method, which is very important, because without creating, what is the use of method? So we will create a method, we will see how a method is created, and then we will move on to the terminologies that we use with a method. So how do we create a method? So a method must be declared within a class. So the first and foremost rule of creating a method is that we need to declare it, or we need to create it within a class. So first we have to create a class, and in that class we can declare a method. We can write the name of that method, which is called declaration or declaring a method. So we will write the name of the method, which is called declaration of the method. So it is defined with the name of the method followed by parentheses. So we have to write the name of the method and we have to use these parentheses. Okay. So now Java provides some predefined methods also, such as system.out.println. So there are many predefined methods also. Methods are basically of two types, we can say. One are user defined methods and one are predefined methods. So now what are user defined methods? User defined methods are the ones in which the user can name the method anything according to the requirement. So whatever code we need to write, we can write it uh, by creating the user defined methods. Whereas there are some predefined methods also. Uh, as the name suggests, predefined methods are already defined in the system. We do not need to define that method. We just need to call that method to execute its functionality. For example, system.out.println. If we want to print anything, we call this method and we write whatever we need to print inside these parentheses, and the method will automatically get executed. So these are called predefined methods. But you can also create your own methods to perform certain actions. For example, this example where I have created a max user defined method. So here max is the name of the method. So it is a user defined method. We are defining this method here. The functionality of this method, we are defining it, which is called the body of the method. So what is the body of the method? Body of the method is basically the code of the method, which which we create, So I have also used here int. Now, what is int? Int is the return type. So what is a return type? In the previous example, I showed you void keyword. So void was used when we did not want to return any value from the method. But if we want to return a value from a method, we use a certain data type. So here we are using int. So that means whatever this method is going to, whatever function this method is going to perform, we are going to get the output in int type, integer type. Okay, so I have written this keyword int here. I've also used the public modifier here. Public is basically an access modifier, which we can write with declaring the method. Now here in the parenthesis, I have written a parameter list. So now this is a new term associated with a method which is called a parameter. Now what is a parameter? Parameter is basically the values that you pass inside these parentheses uh, as arguments. So we can use this, we can use these parameters to pass certain values as arguments, which we will study in the upcoming slides in detail. So here I have defined a method called max, and I have passed these parameters x and y. And in the body of this method, we have a code with an if else statement. So what is this code going to do? This code is going to check if the value of x is greater than the value of y. If it is true, it is going to return the value x. Else, it is going to return the value y. For example, let's suppose the value of x passed is 10, okay, and the value of y passed is 20. So this condition, this if block is going to check if 20 is greater than 10. Is it true? No, it's not true. So this if block will not get executed and the else part will get executed, and it is going to return the value y. Is it okay? So method basically simplifies the task. We can also write the functionality in the functionality or the code in the class itself. But in bigger programs, in bigger applications that we create, uh, defining a code in a certain block increases readability. So the readability of a program increases if we write a code in a certain block which performs a certain action. So now let's move on to the next slide of calling a method. So in the previous slide, we saw how can we create a method, how can we declare a method. Now we are going to see how can we call a method. Now, what do you mean by calling a method? Calling a method basically means uh, using that method. So we can create a method, but we also need to use that method to maybe fetch its value or to run the blocks of code that are in that method. So that is called calling a method. So to call a method in Java, write the method's name followed by two parentheses and a semicolon. So it's a rule, it's a convention of calling a method. So how do we call a method? We write the name of that method and we use it with two parentheses and end it with a semicolon. That is how we call a method. And in the following example, I have created a method called my method. So in the following example, I have created a method called my method, and it is used to print a certain text. So you can provide any functionality in that method because it is a user defined method. So a user defined method is itself a method where you can create any functionality. You can provide any function to that method. So I have created a method called my method, and it is used to print a text, which we are going to see in the next slide. So here, as you can see, uh, this is our main class, and I have created a method called my method. So my method is a user defined method, and I've also written a keyword called void. So void means it's not going to return any value. Okay. So it's just going to execute the block of code that is written inside this method. So what is this method, my method, doing? It is printing a value. It is printing a statement I just got executed. Okay. So this is a simple user defined method called my method, where it is executing this statement, printing this statement I just got executed. Okay. So this was our method, and this was the code of this method. But we also need to use it, right? We have just declared the method up till here. We have just declared this method, but we also need to use this method. So what is using a method in our code? It's called calling a method. So we also need to call this method to execute this code. So in our main method, we are calling our method my method. So how do we call a method? We write the name of that method along with the parenthesis and end it with a semicolon. So this is how we call a method. My method, parenthesis and semicolon. So this is how our method is going to get called. So when we call this method, this line will just get printed. I just got executed. So this was a very simple example to explain you how can we call a method. You can also write n number of code in this method and then call it and use it in bigger applications. Okay. So up till now, what all we have discussed about what methods are, what is the relevance of methods, as in why do we use the methods, how do we declare a method, and how do we call a method. Okay, so now let's move on to the next part, which is calling a method multiple times. So we can also call a method once, or it can be called multiple times. So this is one of the added advantage of methods, that we can call a method once also, or we can just write the code once and call it n number of times. Okay, so it makes the code easier. It makes easier for the programmer to use the same code n number of times. Okay, so this is one of the examples. This is the same example where I have uh, declared the method my method, and I just got executed. I have printed here, nothing else. I am just printing I just got executed. Okay. But in the main method, I am calling my method 3 times. Okay. In the previous example, I was just calling my method once with the name of the method, the parenthesis, and the semicolon. Now I am using it 3 times. I am calling it 3 times. So if I will call the method 3 times, the output will get changed and the output will be delivered 3 times. Okay. So as you can see, with my method, the first my method call, I just got executed, got printed. With the second call, again, it went to the method and printed, I just got executed. And the third time when I called the method, it again went to the code and printed, I just got executed. So here we can see that we can call the method n number of times. So this is one of the advantages of using methods, that we can call it once or we can call it as many times as we want. Now, let's move on to Java method parameters. So in the previous slides, we encountered this word parameters. So now we are going to understand as to what parameters in a method means. So what are parameters? Parameters are the information that can be passed to a method um, during the declaration of the method. So parameter basically acts as variables inside the method. So what actually parameters are? We write the name of the method when we declare a method. In the parentheses, we can pass some variables which we can use in the methods. So those variables or those information is called parameters. We are going to see that in the next slide with an example. So parameters are specified after the method name, as I have told you, and they are written inside the parentheses. You can also add as many parameters as you want, just separate them with a comma. Okay, so it's not like you can just pass one parameter or two parameters. You can pass as many parameters you want, and you can just separate those parameters with a comma. Okay, let's see what parameters are with an example. Okay, so here I have created a user defined method called my method, and in the bracket I have written f name. Now, what is this f name? This is a parameter. Okay, it's basically a variable which we are calling as a parameter because we are passing this variable inside the parenthesis of a method. Okay, so along with the variable, we also need to write the its data type. Okay, so here f name is a of string data type. So we have written this string here along with f name. So I so this is basically a parameter, that the information or the variable that we pass inside a method. Okay, inside the parenthesis of a method. Okay, so now what this program is actually doing, this program basically has a parameter called f name. F name as in the first name. Okay, which we are going to provide it with the help of an argument. Okay, now parameters and arguments, these two terms are used interchangeably when we code. When in many programming languages, parameters and arguments are uh, are one of is the same thing, is the same thing. Okay, but there's slight difference in what a parameter and what an argument is. So a parameter is basically the value that we pass inside the parenthesis of a method. Okay, and while calling a method, the values that we pass are called arguments. Okay, so one and the same thing. The only difference is that when we pass the value inside a method parenthesis, it's called a parameter, whereas when we use that, or when we use that while calling a method, it's called a argument. Okay, so here in this method, so here in this whole program, what are we doing? We are providing the first names as arguments, and this last name will come automatically as it we have just printed this last name in the method. Okay, so here we have defined a method called my method, and we are calling it. Now while calling a method, we are providing the first name, and the second name or the last name is printed as it is. So when we call our method my method, what output we are going to get? We are going to get the output as the first argument that we have passed, which is Ram, along with this last name that we have written, which is Sharma. So the output that we are going to get when we call this method is Ram Sharma. Okay, we are also calling it the second time is my method, and now we are passing the argument as Rita. So what output we are going to get? We are going to get the output as Rita, and this last name will be printed as it is. Okay, so it will be Rita Sharma. Okay, and the third time that we are calling the method, we are passing the argument as Rohan. So what will be the output? The output would be Rohan Sharma. So the f name, the parameter that we have passed, it's going to fetch the value of this parameter from this argument that we have passed while calling the function or the method. So the output that we are going to get is Rohan Sharma. So we have called the method 3 times, and 3 times we are going to get a different output. So this is the use of a method, that we can not we cannot get the output, just the same output n times. We can get different outputs different times by writing the same code. So this is the added advantage of using a method with parameters, that we can get different outputs with the same code by just passing different arguments while calling the method. So the above example has a method that takes a string called fname as parameter, as I've already explained to you. And when the method is called, we pass along a first name, which is used inside the method to print the full name. So we passed the first name as arguments, which is used to print the full name, because the last name we had already written, which was Sharma. So the first name, the different first names that we passed, it got us different set of outputs. Okay. So this is basically the difference between a parameter and an argument. We use it interchangeably, parameters and arguments, in different programming languages, but there is a slight difference. What is the difference? When a parameter is passed to a method, it is called an argument. So parameter and argument basically are values only that we provide with the method. But the only difference is that when we declare a method, we call it a parameter, and when we call a method and pass certain values, it's called an argument. For example, in the previous example, fname, the first name that we used with while declaring the method, it was called a parameter, while Ram, Rita, Rohan, that we called that that we used while calling the method, are called the arguments. Okay, so this was a slight um, difference between a parameter and an argument. Okay, now let's move on to the next slide. Multiple parameters. Okay, so in the previous slides we saw just one parameter. We passed just one parameter, but we can use different or multiple parameters also in the same function. So here I have declared a method called my method, and I have used two parameters here. I have passed two parameters here. One is fname and one is age. So I can use n number of parameters in one method only by just separating them with a comma. Okay. So we can also use multiple parameters by just separating them with a comma. So here I am printing the fname, which I am going to fetch the value by calling a method. And I'm going to print is, and the age is also going to get, we are going to get from the values that we passed as arguments with the methods. So here I am calling my method, and I'm passing one argument called Ram. So in the place of fname, I'm going to get Ram. Is going to get printed as it is. So what output I'm going to get? Ram is, and the 5 will be passed as the argument age. So I'm going to get Ram is 5. Okay. When I call the method the second time, I'm passing a different parameter with the name Rita and the age 8. So here I'm going to get the output as Rita is 8. Okay. And the third time I'm passing the parameters, I have passed Rohan, comma 31. So what output I'm going to get? Rohan is 31. Okay. So in the same method, I have used two parameters and I'm getting a different value because I'm passing now two arguments. Okay. So we can use single parameter also while using a method, and we can use two parameters or multiple parameters, 3, 2, 3, 4, any multiple parameters while creating the methods. Okay, now let's talk about return values in a method. Now, what are return values? As we discussed in the previous slides, I used a keyword void in, in the method with the method. So the void keyword used in the examples above indicate that methods should not return a value. Okay. Void keyword means it's not going to return, the method is not going to return any value. If you want to return method, if you want the method to return a value, you can use primitive data types such as int, char, etc. Okay, instead of void, and use the return keyword inside the method. We are going to see how it works with the help of an example. Okay, how can we return values with the methods? Here I have created a user defined method called my method. The name of my method is my method, and I am passing one single argument with the data type int as x. Okay, so now here instead of void before my method, I am writing int. So what does this means? It means that this method is going to return some value. Okay. So if we wrote void instead of int, it meant that we would not be returning any value from this method. But here, instead of void, we have used int. So what does this int means? Int means that this method is going to return some value. Okay. So along with writing this int, we also have to mention this return keyword. Okay. Along with the code that we along with the output that we want from this method. Okay. So now I have passed a parameter called x. So I also have to give the value to this x variable or this x parameter. So while calling my method, I am passing a value 3 to this parameter. So 3, the value of x will become now 3. Okay, and I'm printing it. Now I am directly printing it because this method is returning some value. Okay, so what is this method returning? This method is returning the value 5 plus x. So x, the value of x will be fetched as 3. So 5 plus 3 will become 8. So this 8 value is going to get returned and get printed as I have used this method inside the print line uh, print line method. Okay. So what output we are going to get? We are going to get the output as 8. Okay. So returning value from a method also becomes important when we want to fetch an output from the method, not just execute the lines of code that we have written inside the method. So if we want to get a value from a method, we will use the return keyword. Okay. So this was about returning a value from a method. So we have discussed many things about methods, what methods are, what are the uses of methods, how do we declare a method or how do we create a method, how do we call a method. Okay, then we saw different parameters, how we can pass parameters to a method, and then we saw how we return values from a method. Now let's move on to the next block, which is the if else statement. We can also use if else block, if else statement inside the method. Okay, so here is an example to demonstrate that. I have created a method called check age. Okay, and I am passing an argument called age. Okay, and inside this method I am writing the if else block. So what this method is going to do, it's going to check the age of the user. If the age entered is less than 18, it's going to print access denied, you are not old enough. Okay, and If the age of the user entered is greater than 18, it's going to print access granted, you are old enough. Okay. So how do we access this method? How do we use this method that I've created here as checked age? I have to call this method. Okay. So how do we call a method? For calling a method, I have to write the name of the method, and as I have passed I have passed a parameter called age. So I also have to provide a value to that age parameter. So here I am providing 20 to the age parameter. Okay. So 20 will get passed here. Okay. Now it's going to check if 20 is less than 18. Is it less than 18? No. So it's going to 20 is less than 18. If yes, it's going to print access granted. And if no, it's going to print access denied. So 20 is greater than 18, right? So it's going to move on to the else block and print access granted. You are old enough. Okay. So this is how we can use if else statement also inside the methods. Okay, now let's discuss about one more topic related to the methods, which is called method overloading. Okay, now what is method overloading? Uh, with method overloading, multiple methods can have the same name with different parameters. Okay, now what method overloading basically is, we can create a method with same name. We can create 2 or 3 or n methods with same name, but by passing different parameters. So now with the different parameters, what do I mean here? With an example I have demonstrated, I have created a method called my method. Okay, and I have passed here a parameter x with the data type int. Now I can create the same method with the same name with a different parameter. Now what does different parameter mean? Different parameter means that the data type of the parameter is different, or the number of the parameters are different. So it can work either way. It can work either way. The data type of the parameters could be different, or the number of the parameters could be different with the same variable. Okay. So the name of the methods can be same, but we can use it differently. Okay, let's see that. Let's understand that better. If we have to perform one operation, having the same name of the method increases the readability of the program. Okay, so there are two ways to overload the methods in Java. The first name, as I have already told you, by changing the number of arguments. So we can write the same name of the method, but we can provide different number of arguments while passing the arguments. Or else we can do that by changing the data type. Let's suppose we are passing just one parameter. So we can pass only one parameter to both the methods, but the data type should be different in that case. Okay, let's see that with the help of an example. Here I have created a program by changing the number of arguments. So here I have created two methods with the same name. The name of the method is add. Okay, add. But the parameters that are passed are different. The number of parameters that are passed are different. Here I have passed 2 parameters, and here in this add method I have passed 3 parameters. Okay, so with the same name I have created 2 methods, but with different number of arguments. So this is called method overloading. Okay, so here when we are going to call this method add uh, by using the class, by accessing it with the help of class, we are passing two parameters arguments here, 11 and 11. So a is going to get the value 11 and b is also going to get the value 11. So what this method is doing, this method is returning a plus b. So what is 11 plus 11? 11 plus 11, we are going to get the output as 22. And In the second case, I have to pass now three arguments because here three parameters are there, A, B, and C. So for A, 11, for B, 11, and for C, 11. So 11 plus 11 plus 11, we get the output as 33. Okay. So with the same name, we are getting different output. This is called method overloading. Okay. We can do the same process. We can do the same method overloading by providing different data types also. Here in this method, here in this program, there are two methods with the name add. Okay. And the data types are different. The number of parameters are same. We are passing two parameters. Here also two parameters. But the data types of the parameters are different. Here we are passing int data type and here we are passing double data type. So accordingly, we can pass the value as int and double. So here we are, for the first method, we are passing 11 and 11. So 11 plus 11, we are going to get 22. And for the double values, we are passing 12.3 and 12.6. So for A, 12.3 and for B, 12.6. So we are going to get the output 24.9. Okay, so this was method overloading where we can use the method, we can write the same name of the method but pass different parameters. Okay, so the parameters data type could be different or the parameters number could be different. Okay, so this is how we use method overloading in Java. So instead of defining two methods that should do the same thing, it is better to overload one. Okay. So in the previous example, the method was adding only, but the data types were different. So it is better to overload the method if they are doing the same task. Okay. So multiple methods can have the same name as long as the number or and type of parameters are different. Okay. So what is the advantage of method overloading? Method overloading increases the readability of the program. Okay. Okay. Now let's end this session with the advantages, with discussing the advantages of the methods. Now, what are the advantages of using a method in any programming languages? So giving a proper method name increases the readability, understandability of the purpose of the method. Okay. So as we have discussed it, the readability and understandability of a method of a program increases by using methods. Okay. Say, for example, multiply here, you can immediately understand that this method will multiply two integer values. Okay. Or we can define it as divide or add, as we have seen the programs in the previous slides. What is the second advantage? It increases reusability of the code, thus also reduce the size of the code. So we can reuse the code also. This is the second, reusability is the second advantage of methods. The third advantage is complex problems can be modularized with the help of methods. Okay, so very complex problems, we can modularize it and make it simpler with the help of methods. Now, in case code is written without a method, it will grow very large in size and thus would also become difficult to test, debug, and maintain the code. So it will become a cumbersome process to understand the whole code of the program if we have not used methods. So these all were the advantages of using the methods. And this was about the session. I hope you understood all that we have discussed about methods in Java. Thank you so much.